It began like any other morning on Maple Street, quiet, breezy, and filled with the smell of freshly baked bread. The bakery stood at the corner, as it had for years, with its painted windows and flower boxes full of red geraniums. It was a place of comfort, a landmark where people gathered and routines started. But that week, something new had arrived. A stray dog. It was small, probably just under a year old, with shaggy brown fur matted from days without care. Its ribs were slightly visible beneath its dusty coat, but it wasn't the kind of dog that looked pitiful. It looked patient, as if it had come with a purpose. The first person to notice it was Mr. Kaleem, the bakery owner. He stepped out one morning, wiping flour from his hands, and nearly tripped over the animal curled against the step. The dog didn't bark or bolted, simply looked up at him with deep, solemn eyes. "Shoo," he muttered, waving a hand. The dog stood, backed away a few steps, and sat again just a little farther off. By noon, it had become the topic of chatter among regulars. "That dog gives me the creeps," muttered one customer. "Maybe it's lost," said another. "It needs to go," snapped a woman holding her toddler's hand. "It's filthy." The bakery had never had problems before. The area was clean, safe. This dog, silent and unmoving, felt like a disturbance to the flow of things. Children tried to feed it bits of bread, but the dog ignored the food. It didn't sniff trash. It didn't approach anyone. It sat and stared at the bakery door, as if waiting for it to open and reveal someone it knew. By the third day, people started acting. Teenagers riding by on bicycles would toss stones, laughing when the dog flinched. An older man poked it with his umbrella, trying to scare it off. The dog never retaliated. It didn't run away for long. By morning, it was back again, sitting in the exact same spot, its eyes never straying far from the bakery's wooden entrance. Some said it was a bad sign. Others thought it might have rabies. A few people whispered that maybe it was cursed. After all, what kind of animal takes abuse day after day and keeps coming back for more? Only one person saw something different. Alina was a young nurse who walked past the bakery every day on her way to the hospital. She began to notice the dog's behavior and how consistent it was. It didn't act like other strays she'd seen in the city. It wasn't wandering. It wasn't hunting for food. It wasn't even trying to be noticed. It was just waiting. One morning, she stopped a few steps away and crouched down slowly. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "Are you okay?" The dog looked at her, head tilting slightly. For the first time it blinked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She opened it and placed a piece on the sidewalk. The dog didn't touch it. Alina watched for a moment longer, then stood. Her shift was starting. She walked on, but she kept looking back until the bakery was out of view. The next morning, the sandwich was still there, untouched. Alina felt a chill despite the warmth in the air. She looked into the dog's eyes and saw something that stopped her breath. It wasn't hunger, it wasn't fear. It was grief, the kind that didn't need words. The dog wasn't lost. It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting for someone, and someone, somewhere, had left it behind. Alina couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a stray. There was a story here, one that no one knew yet, one that, if uncovered, might change how everyone saw the silent figure on the sidewalk. But until that moment came, the dog stayed where it was outside the bakery, facing the door, holding on to a memory that no one else could see. As the days turned into weeks, the dog outside the bakery became a fixture, just as much a part of the morning routine as the bell over the bakery door or the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting into the street. But not everyone saw it as something harmless. Some began to feel uneasy. Others were simply tired of seeing it every morning. It wasn't doing anything wrong, but its quiet presence stirred something like guilt or discomfort, the kind that made people lash out for no clear reason. Mr. Kaleem had enough of it. One afternoon, as the dog lay curled up beside the flower box, he came outside with a broom and jabbed the bristles near its paws. "Go on, get out of here," he snapped, jabbing again. The dog lifted its head slowly, looked at him for a long moment, and rose. Without barking or growling, it trotted a few feet away and sat again, still facing the bakery door. Kaleem sighed in frustration. "This isn't a shelter," he muttered under his breath, and walked back inside. The next day, someone left a small dish of milk near the dog. It remained untouched. Teenagers walking home from school noticed this and laughed. "That dog's broken," one of them joked. doesn't even want food. Later that evening, when the bakery had closed and the street was nearly empty, the same group came back. One of them picked up a pebble and tossed it toward the dog. It hit the sidewalk and bounced. The dog flinched but didn't move, didn't even bark. Another laughed. Try again. The second rock was larger. It struck the dog's side with a dull thump. The dog jumped back, clearly in pain, but made no sound. It didn't run far, just enough to avoid the next one. Then, as if drawn by something stronger than fear, it circled back to its usual spot. Alina saw the bruises first. She noticed the way the dog limped slightly as it stood, and the fresh dirt on its side. Her heart sank. Something inside her refused to ignore it any longer. She crouched down again that morning, this time with a bottle of water and a clean cloth. "Hey," she said softly, "can I help you?" The dog didn't move, but it watched her closely. She wet the cloth and carefully reached forward. It didn't back away. She dabbed the dirt from its fur and saw a faint purple mark near its ribs. "A bruise. You poor thing," she whispered. "Why are they doing this to you?" Behind her, someone muttered, "Shouldn't feed it, then it'll never leave." Alina turned but didn't respond. The comment didn't surprise her. People often feared what they didn't understand, but she was beginning to understand piece by piece. This dog wasn't just lingering for no reason. It had a mission. It was waiting, not wandering. Inside the bakery, Kaleem installed a camera, not for security, but to build a case. He was tired of complaints and wanted proof the dog was causing trouble. If he could show the footage to the municipal office, maybe they'd come take it away. But the first few days of recordings showed nothing but the dog lying quietly, occasionally lifting its head when someone entered or exited the bakery. Barking, no aggression, just waiting. Still, the hostility outside grew. Children were warned to stay away. People crossed the street to avoid it. Some tossed garbage in its direction. The community, unknowingly, had turned its discomfort into cruelty. And still, the dog returned, limping, sore, but silent. Its gaze always toward the bakery door. Alina couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed wondering what the dog was trying to tell them. Why this place? Why that door? What did it see that no one else did? She decided she would find out, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she felt it like the quiet tension before a storm. A feeling that the truth, whatever it was, would be far more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Alina couldn't stop thinking about the dog. At first, she told herself it was just sympathy. She had seen hurt animals before, injured cats, hit by motorcycles, street dogs limping from fights, but this was different. This dog wasn't just hurting, it was grieving. She could feel it in the way it stared at the bakery door, unwavering, like it was waiting for someone to return. The next morning, she brought her brother's old DSLR camera to work. It wasn't fancy, but it had a good zoom lens. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to capture, maybe evidence of the mistreatment or a moment that would help her understand the animal's strange loyalty. She positioned herself on a bench across the street, pretending to scroll her phone while the camera rested in her lap. The dog was already there, same spot, same posture, ears forward, eyes on the bakery door. Minutes passed. A delivery truck pulled up. A man stepped out with trays of bread. The dog stood up briefly, its body tense with anticipation. But when the man entered and didn't look its way, it sat back down again, lowering its head. Alina caught every moment on camera. Later that night, as she reviewed the footage on her laptop, something struck her. The dog had only reacted when the man in the red jacket had walked by the delivery driver. No one else caused it to stir. Not the children passing by, not the customer who spilled a coffee cup, not even the small group of teenagers who tossed a plastic bottle at it. Only the man in the red jacket. She paused the video and zoomed in. The dog's eyes had followed him from the moment he appeared in the frame to the moment he disappeared behind the bakery door. "That's it," she whispered to herself. "That's who it's waiting for." The next day, Alina approached Kaleem at the bakery. He was dusting powdered sugar over pastries when she stepped inside. "Do you remember the man in the red jacket?" she asked. "The delivery guy who used to come here." "I think the dog knew him." Kaleem looked up, squinting. "Red jacket. Oh yes, that boy. Came every morning for a while. Nice enough. Do you know his name?" she pressed. "I don't remember," he said with a shrug. "He stopped showing up a few months ago. We get different delivery guys now." Alina nodded politely, but her thoughts were racing. She needed to find out who that man was. If the dog was waiting for him, maybe there was a story hidden beneath everything, maybe even a tragedy. Over the next 2 days, she visited the delivery office listed on the bakery's invoices. It took some convincing, but one of the clerks finally pulled up an old record. "Here," the woman said, pointing at a screen. "That's the guy, Waqas Iqbal, assigned to Maple Street route," until she paused, frowning. "What is it?" Alina asked. "He was in an accident, delivery van crash. It happened about 3 months ago. He didn't make it." Alina felt her heart stop. 3 months ago. That was exactly when the dog had first appeared. She thanked the woman and walked out of the building in a daze. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. But they weren't just fitting, they were shattering something inside her. The dog had watched Waqas walk into the bakery that morning and never come back out. He had never returned to tell it goodbye. He had simply disappeared, leaving behind a faithful friend who didn't understand what had happened, who only knew to wait. Alina sat on the curb outside the bakery that evening, watching the dog rest its head on its paws. She no longer saw a stray, she saw a companion left behind, a heart still searching for its missing half. "I know now," she whispered. "I know who you're waiting for." And though the dog didn't move, a soft breeze swept down the street just then, rustling the petals of the geraniums and brushing against her cheek, almost like an answer. Word was beginning to spread. It started with whispers between neighbors, then reached the staff at nearby shops. People had noticed Alina sitting near the bakery in the mornings, sometimes offering water to the dog, sometimes just watching in silence. A few asked questions. Most just assumed she was one of those animal lovers. But Alina had seen the truth. She had uncovered what no one else had taken the time to understand. And now, more than ever, she was determined to make others see it too. Meanwhile, inside the bakery, Mr. Kaleem remained unconvinced. "This has gone too far," he grumbled one morning, sweeping crumbs from the counter. "Now, people are taking its side like it's some kind of hero." He'd started getting complaints not about the dog, but about his reaction to it. Someone had posted online about how he kept a stick by the door. Another person had uploaded a photo of the dog with a bandage around its leg, tagging the bakery. The comments section had exploded. Still, Kaleem stood firm. "People are soft these days," he muttered. "It's a stray. Strays belong in shelters, not on sidewalks." So, to settle it once and for all, he made a decision. The next morning, a small black security camera appeared above the bakery entrance, discreet but powerful. It faced the sidewalk where the dog always sat. Kaleem wasn't interested in the dog's loyalty. He wanted evidence, proof that it was a threat, that it made customers uncomfortable, that it needed to be removed. "I'll give the footage to the authorities," he told his assistant. "Once they see it, they'll send someone to pick it up, maybe even the pound." But the camera captured something else. Each morning the dog arrived just before dawn. It would curl up near the step, facing the bakery door, its body still except for the occasional flick of its tail or a slow turn of its head. When the bakery opened, the dog would sit upright, alert, watching every person who entered. Its gaze held no aggression, just quiet hope. Sometimes a customer would stop to talk to it. A child might wave. A passerby would leave a piece of food. The dog would ignore them all. Its eyes never left the door. And every night, after the bakery closed and the sun dipped behind the buildings, the dog would rise, stretch its stiff legs, and slowly walk down the sidewalk. It would vanish into the shadows until the next morning brought it back again. After 3 days, Kaleem sat in his back office watching the footage on his laptop. His frown deepened with every frame. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. There were no signs of aggression, no threatening behavior, no barking, no chasing, no confrontation, just waiting. He leaned back in his chair, confused. For the first time in weeks, the hard edge in his voice began to soften. That evening, he watched from the window as Alina approached the dog again. She brought a blanket, this time folded neatly under one arm, and a bowl of clean water. She laid the blanket beside the flower box and gently guided the dog onto it. The dog obeyed, quietly settling down. It looked up at her for a moment, then rested its head on its paws. Kaleem didn't know why, but something about the scene stayed with him long after he'd locked the shop that night. Later, as he scrolled through the bakery's online reviews, a new one caught his eye. It wasn't about the pastries. It was a single photo, the dog lying in front of the bakery, eyes filled with longing. The caption read, "He's not lost. He's waiting." And sometimes, love refuses to forget. Something stirred in Kaleem's chest, something he hadn't felt in years. The camera had done its job, but it hadn't captured guilt. It had captured love. By the end of the week, the footage from the bakery's camera had done more than Kaleem expected. It had shifted his perspective. What he once saw as a nuisance now felt like a mystery that deserved attention. He wasn't the only one watching anymore. Alina had spoken to a friend who worked for a local community blog. With Kaleem's reluctant permission, they shared a short video, clip less than a minute long, showing the dog sitting silently in front of the bakery, rising only when a man in a red jacket walked past. In old footage from a few months ago, the man patted the dog's head and walked inside. That man was Walker's Iqbal. Alina had learned his name just days earlier, a delivery worker, kind and quiet, who used to bring bread and supplies to the bakery. According to the delivery company, he'd passed away in an accident soon after that video was recorded. What struck everyone was the dog's reaction in that final clip. The way it perked up, the way its tail wagged faintly, the recognition, the hope, the way it kept its eyes fixed on the bakery door long after Walker's had entered and never returned. The clip was titled, "The Dog That Waited for a Friend Who Never Came Back." Within hours, it began to spread. At first, it was just a few shares and some kind comments. But then, a larger Facebook page reposted it. By nightfall, the video had thousands of views. The comments poured in. "I'm crying. This is loyalty in its purest form. We don't deserve animals like this. Someone give this baby a home. What if he's still waiting for his owner to come out?" By morning, the story was trending locally. News outlets called it heartbreaking. A journalist visited the bakery to speak with Kaleem and Alina. They showed the original footage and told the whole story from the dog's arrival to the recent discovery of Walker's accident. Kaleem, though still a little uncomfortable in front of cameras, admitted, "I didn't understand it at first. I thought it was just another stray. But now, I feel like I was looking at something sacred and didn't even know it." That day, a crowd gathered outside the bakery not to buy bread, but to see the dog. People brought treats, toys, and even small handwritten notes, placing them gently near where the dog lay. Children crouched beside it, whispering kind words. Elderly women wiped their eyes and touched its fur with reverence. And still, the dog did what it always had. It watched the door. Quiet, faithful, unchanged. Alina sat near the flower box and gently stroked its head. "They all see you now," she whispered. "They know your story." Later that afternoon, the bakery's front window featured something new. A framed photograph of Walker's in his red jacket, smiling as he carried a delivery bag. Beside it, a handwritten note from Kaleem that read, "In memory of a kind soul, and in honor of the one who never forgot him." People began referring to the dog as Wafa, the Urdu word for loyalty. It wasn't an official name, but it stuck. It suited him. Alina, who had spent so many quiet mornings with him, felt both joy and sorrow. The story had reached the world, but Wafa still didn't know that the one he waited for was never coming back. That night, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Alina sat beside Wafa under the bakery's warm lights. The crowd had gone home. The street was calm. She looked at him and said softly, "He's not behind that door anymore, but you waited long enough. Maybe it's time for you to go home, too." The dog didn't respond. His eyes still followed the bakery door, but there was something softer in them now, as if, somehow, he was beginning to understand. And for the first time in weeks, Wafa leaned into Alina's touch, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The world now knew about Wafa. From bustling corners of the city to quiet homes far away, people were reading and sharing his story. But even as photos and hashtags trended online, the dog remained unmoved, still faithful, still silent, still watching that bakery door, as if it held the entire meaning of his existence. To some, this loyalty was beautiful. To others, it was unbearable. Alina fell into the latter group. Every morning, she visited him before work. Every evening, she stopped by again. But Wafa's eyes never stopped searching. His gaze never wandered far from that same door. Even with the public's love, even with toys and treats surrounding him like gifts at a shrine, his world remained centered on someone who wasn't coming back. Alina couldn't stop thinking about it. She needed closure, not just for herself, but for Wafa. She had already confirmed Walker's accident. She knew the date, the location, and the aftermath. but there was something missing. Something that hadn't been explained. How had Waffa ended up at the bakery right after Walker's died? Dogs don't read addresses. They don't follow paperwork. They follow people. So, how did Waffa know where to go? One afternoon, Alina tracked down Walker's former supervisor. The man was hesitant at first, busy and skeptical. But once she mentioned the dog, his face changed. "You mean that little brown one?" he said quietly. "He used to follow Walker's to work sometimes." Alina nodded, so the dog knew the route. "Yeah," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "Walker's would share his lunch with it. He told us once that it had started waiting for him at the alley behind his building. He never brought it inside, but he called it his shadow. Said it followed him like it had nowhere else to be." Alina felt her chest tighten. "Do you know where he lived?" she asked gently. The supervisor gave her an address. The next morning, Alina took a taxi to the old apartment complex. It was a modest building in a quieter part of the city. She asked a few neighbors if they remembered Walker's, and nearly all of them did. "He was a nice boy," said an old woman with a cane, "always helping with groceries." "I remember that dog," said a younger man from the second floor. "He used to sit outside Walker's door sometimes. Then, after the accident, he disappeared." The pieces were falling into place. Waffa had followed Walker's from home to work, learning his routine step by step. The morning Walker's entered the bakery and never came back. Waffa had waited outside. When Walker's didn't return, Waffa simply stayed. He didn't go looking. He didn't get distracted. He waited day after day, week after week. Waffa had seen Walker's go in, but never come back out, and that's where his world had stopped. Alina returned to the bakery that evening with a heavy heart. She found Waffa curled beside the flower box, his head resting on his paws. The crowd of visitors had thinned in recent days. The excitement online had passed, but Waffa remained injured, untouched by the noise of the world around him. She knelt beside him and whispered, "I found out where you came from. I even saw the building you used to wait in front of. You knew him. You loved him." Waffa blinked slowly, as if her voice was a familiar melody. "I wish I could tell you the truth in a way you'd understand," she continued. "But maybe you already do. Maybe you've known all along." A light drizzle began to fall. The scent of rain on warm concrete filled the air. Alina placed a soft towel over Waffa's back and stayed there. Silent inside the bakery. Kaleem watched from the window, his arms folded. His eyes were tired, but something else shone through: regret, perhaps, or maybe reverence. Because Waffa had not just waited, he had mourned. And in doing so, he had reminded a whole city what loyalty looked like, not in words, not in grand gestures, but in quiet, aching patience. The rain that evening was soft but steady, like the city itself was mourning with Waffa. Alina stayed with him under a shared umbrella long after the streetlights blinked on. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Waffa was calm, almost peaceful. Now, his eyes, once sharp and restless, looked gentler, as if some part of him had begun to understand the truth. But understanding didn't erase the pain. The story had touched the hearts of thousands, yet those closest to it, the very people who had once shooed Waffa away, ignored him, or worse now, felt a heaviness in their chests, a quiet shame they hadn't expected. They remembered the rocks. They remembered the names they had called him: dirty, useless, dangerous. They remembered the way they crossed the street to avoid him, how quickly they judged, how easily they believed that something silent and loyal could be dangerous. Simply because it was different. The camera footage had gone viral, yes, but it also played on a loop in their minds, now especially the part where Waffa sat up, the moment Walker's entered the bakery, months ago, the hope in his eyes, the moment that changed everything. Kaleem was the first to act. He stepped outside one morning, holding something carefully wrapped in cloth. He knelt beside Waffa and laid it down. A small wooden sign, handmade, painted with steady hands. It read, "Walker's place, the one who never forgot." Below it, a bowl of clean water, a small bed made from an old flour sack, and a few fresh biscuits. Waffa sniffed the offering, looked at Kaleem, then quietly rested his head on the sack. Others followed. The who once avoided Waffa now brought blankets every other day. A shop owner down the road organized donations for food and care. Children who had once thrown stones now left drawings of Waffa taped to the bakery window. One child's picture showed Waffa with wings, sitting beside a smiling man in a red jacket. The community, slowly and sincerely, was trying to make things right, not just for Wafa, but for what they had become. They realized the problem hadn't been the dog. It had been their unwillingness to see. Alina watched the change with cautious hope. She knew public attention could be brief. Stories fade, trends move on. But something deeper was happening here. This wasn't about likes or views anymore. This was about healing, about seeing past appearances and learning to ask questions before making judgments. One evening, as the sky turned gold behind the rooftops, Alina sat beside Wafa and spoke gently. "You changed them, you know," without a single word. He didn't respond, but his tail brushed the sidewalk once, a quiet gesture of comfort. She'd spoken to an animal shelter about Wafa's future. They offered to help, but Alina hesitated. Something told her that removing Wafa from the place he'd waited so long would be like erasing the memory entirely. He had made this sidewalk sacred. This was where he remembered. This was where he belonged. So instead she proposed something new. A community care agreement. Every day, one person from the neighborhood would check on Wafa, give him food, refill his water, brush his fur if he allowed it. No cages, no confinement, just kindness. The bakery would provide shelter. A small wooden doghouse was built beside the flower box, painted red, in Walker's favorite color. Kaleem approved it all, quietly. He no longer muttered about strays. He simply watched Wafa, now, the way a person watches something they once misunderstood and now hold in quiet awe. The next time a journalist came to visit, they found Wafa resting beside the bakery, surrounded by letters, flowers, and toys. Children sat beside him reading books aloud, as if keeping him company while he waited. The headline read, "From Forgotten Stray to Symbol of Loyalty. How One Dog Reminded a City to Care." And through it all, Wafa remained the same. Still watching, still hoping. But now, he was no longer alone. The weeks passed gently. What had once been a forgotten sidewalk became something close to sacred. The little corner outside the bakery, once stained by stone throwing and judgment, now carried the weight of love, memory, and second chances. Wafa no longer limped. His wounds had healed, and his fur, once patchy and tangled, had grown thick and soft, thanks to regular care from the neighborhood. But even as his body grew stronger, his spirit remained exactly the same. He still arrived early each morning, just before dawn. He still sat quietly beside the bakery door, and when it opened, he lifted his head slightly, searching, waiting, always waiting. Alina came every day. Sometimes she brought him food, other times a gentle story, and often just her presence. The bond between them had grown beyond explanation. Though Wafa didn't wag his tail excitedly or leap into her arms, his trust in her was visible in quieter ways, in the way he leaned into her hand, in the way he followed her with his eyes, in the way he let her sit in silence beside him. But Alina had been thinking about the future. She knew Wafa wouldn't sit on that sidewalk forever. His body might allow it, but his heart had been slowly letting go. She could see it in the way he now sometimes turned his head away from the door, just briefly, as if part of him was learning to look beyond it. And so, one morning, Alina brought something different, a collar. It was simple brown leather with a silver tag that read, "Wafa, loved and remembered." She knelt beside him, showing it to him with an open palm. "It's your choice," she said softly. "If you want to keep waiting, I'll wait with you. But if you're ready, there's a home waiting for you, too." Wafa didn't move at first. His eyes remained fixed on the bakery. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward her. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, something passed between them, a quiet answer, not spoken, not shown, but deeply understood. He stood up, walked toward her, and lowered his head. Alina's breath caught. Gently, with hands that trembled, she fastened the collar around his neck. The bakery door creaked open behind them. Mr. Kaleem stepped out, holding a warm loaf of bread. He smiled when he saw the collar. "So, he's finally going home?" he asked. Alina nodded. "Yes, he's ready." The community gathered one last time that evening, not to say goodbye but to honor the journey. Flowers were placed beside Wafa's little red house. Letters were tucked under his blanket. Someone even brought a small painting of him and walking together down Maple Street, side by side. Children hugged him. Adults shook Alina's hand. Kaleem placed a final offering of bread by the door, then leaned down and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." That night, Wafa stepped into Alina's car for the first time. He sat quietly, looking out the window. ears slightly perked. The city passed by, its buildings, its noise, its people, but Waffa didn't seem anxious. He sat like a traveler who had finally found his path. Alina's home was modest but warm. A garden in the back, a soft couch near the window. She had prepared everything: bedding, toys, bowls, but Waffa didn't rush to explore. Instead, he walked over to the window and sat down, watching the stars. She knelt beside him and whispered, "He would be proud of you." Waffa blinked slowly, then rested his head in her lap. And in that moment, the waiting was over. But the story was far from forgotten. In the weeks that followed, schools used Waffa's story to teach kindness. Shelters shared it to encourage adoption. The bakery even changed the name of one of its breads, Walker's Loaf, in honor of loyalty. But for Alina, the lesson was something simpler. Sometimes the quietest souls carry the heaviest grief. Sometimes love is expressed not in words, but in waiting. And sometimes, even when the person we love is gone, the love they leave behind finds a new home. Waffa never returned to the bakery sidewalk. He didn't need to, because his heart, once shattered by loss, had finally found where it belonged.